Hello and welcome to another Madaxman Army List podcast. This week we're going all Meso-American for you. We're bringing in the Aztecs, the Incas, the Texcallans, the Chiantecs and the Mayans, all the full set of lists for all your bright coloured paints. This week we've also got a unique new tie-up with Fighting 15s, who are selling ready-made army packs at a discounted rate of some of the lists that we're featuring in this podcast. So what's not to like? Loads of army lists, hopefully a bit of educational chat and also some cheaper figures. What a great week. Don't forget, all the lists that we're going to talk about here as well will also be posted on the ADLG wiki on the Madaxman website. So sit back, get ready and enjoy our Meso-American special.
This means war.
Well, welcome everybody to yet another Madaxman multi-list ADLG list building special. This time, of course, I'm joined by Richard and Dave, the regular team for these army list specific podcasts. And for this week, we're doing something even unusual by our own standards. And I suspect this is we're actually looking at lists which none of us have ever fielded, and possibly none of us have ever actually played against either. And we're looking at the Americas, and more specifically the armies in the first half of the Americas. And this is sort of a tie-in as well with some of a project that I've been doing for Ian, who runs the company Fighting 15s, where I've been helping him design some ready-made army packs for ADLG. And Fighting 15s in their Gladiator Games range are one of the relatively few companies who do a South American range or range of different things. So it's an interesting period. It's armies that I think in every set of rules people think about getting and then realize that they're probably not very good, and there's not that many events that you can field them in. And historically, it's been a lot of painting as well to field something that's not very good, and you won't get many chances to use it, even though they're very, very colourful. I don't. Am I right, guys, in thinking these are armies that you don't own and have never fielded or faced?
I've not got any armies of them yet. Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, I don't own them. Not faced them in ADLG, but I have faced them in earlier rule systems. I faced them in Fog in a couple of times and DBMM.
Actually, Seventh was the place where they had their heyday, wasn't it? It was the double-armed regular B skirmishing medium infantry with two-handed cutting weapon that were absolutely devastating under the rules. They were some of the best troops. They would shred anything, wouldn't they? That was I do remember now. Yes, going back as far as Seventh. My God. That sends shivers down the spine, doesn't it? But but none of us have fought these in ADLG. Because they do sit in that funny period. What does tend to happen is there's very rarely a competition for these specific armies, but they do occasionally get lumped in as potential armies to use in competitions with other themes. And maybe that's kind of the starting point, sort of skimming over them a bit about how best they fit, because if we look a bit at the history and what these armies actually were, and how they were built together, and then think what is the kind of the closest equivalent to them. I don't know, looking at how these armies are, there's a lot of impetuous foot, there's a lot of two-handed cutting weapon, they're all medium infantry. What do you guys know about the history that allowed these empires to get, in theory, so big over such a long period of time with what just still looks like a bit of a rush and stab sort of rush the enemy and stab them sort of way of fighting?
Okay, so Central America is a place in its own space, really. It's almost outer space with the rest of the world. It's a completely different culture to anything else we see in Europe or even Africa and places like that. So what you've got is a mixture of city-states, in essence, which come into rise and fall and change. So you've got an early period, which was the Zapotec and Mixtec, who build the central Mexican temples. The Aztecs then arrived. I think they actually migrate from North America and bring quite a few North American warfare traits into Central America. But what you end up a result with is a load of city-states which gradually coalesce into the Aztec Empire, which is still a bunch of city-states. The warfare is intensely ritualistic. It's not something that we would recognize as warfare in Europe, and that, as I'll go on to say, is something which led to their massive failure against the conquistadors. So the object of warfare was to not kill the enemy, it was to take prisoners, take them back to your city, and then sacrifice them in the most gruesome manners you could possibly find. The Aztecs actually, at the height of their power, just before the conquistadors arrived, are actually surrounding other city-states like the Texcallans, and almost every year they have what they call a flower war. So they declare war on the Texcallans every year, and they show up with their army just to sort of supply 10,000 warrior prisoners to take home and sacrifice on their temples. So it's a ritualistic method of warfare, but that doesn't mean that they're not sophisticated. They're very sophisticated in a lot of ways. They have a noble military elite who live together, are religious, who live in dormitories and things like that, who are the famous jaguar warriors and eagle warriors and things like that. But then you have a lot of other people, and there's a way that youths become members of the nobility through, you're marked up like a North American, with the feathers in the hair. The more people you kill or take prisoner in battle, take prisoner, the higher status and ranking you get in society.
Is that sort of why these armies don't appear to evolve in a technological or style sort of way? Because the Mixtecs and the Zapotec list is, you've got to kind of eyeball the dates to realize that it's before some of the other ones. They're not massively different.
They're kind of evolutions of each other. But then when the Aztecs arrive in Central America, they find the old Zapotec temples, and it's deserted. Some of the societies thrive for maybe, some of them in South America, more than Central America, can go on for about 100 years. Some can go for 500 years, then they disappear, leaving traces of themselves, and then they rise up again under a kind of a different name. But they all do, yes. I mean, it's essentially Indian warfare without the horse. If you think of the Western movies, it's very much similar to that, but it's got a certain level of sophistication in their society because of the religion. These are religious cults, and I think the thing I was going to go on to say is that we actually do believe their total mentality was something completely different to Western mentality. So it wasn't the technology of the conquistadors when they arrived which destroyed them. It was the shock and awe of seeing something completely different, which completely destroyed their headspace. Their consciousness was blown by the arrival of the Spanish. And the idea of Spanish running up and going, right, I'm going to stab you through the body with a bloody great iron sword. The warriors they were facing were like, no, that's not how you do warfare. Smack me over the head, I smack you over the head and take you home and then bleed you dry and throw you down the side of our pyramid. No,
they might have been able to recover from that, but while they were going through that psychological shock, they were then faced with waves of illnesses from various European pathogens, which by some estimates decimated 90% of the population, which obviously for quite an intensely religious society inevitably tends to be seen as the deities aren't pleased with us when that many people start dying in the streets. So
certainly not, 90% losses, I guess, is technically a reverse decimation. There's probably another Latin word for it. It's your survivors are decimated, but something like that. But,
there's modern historians who are saying the same in North America, that we've actually underestimated the destruction that the epidemics brought by Europeans did to the Americans. I mean, even while the conquistadors were there, people were starting to die in droves in the Aztec Empire. Absolutely appalling scenes.
And it is, I've been fortunate enough to visit some of these sites, and the sheer scale of some of these cities and the size of the pyramids is really awe-inspiring. I mean, these if you think at the time, I don't know what, London was in 1500, but maybe it was 50 to 100,000. And some of these cities were probably 250,000 people. So, they were vast cities, and culturally very sophisticated. Going back to the military point, I think partly it's, they didn't have the horse, so that limits a number of developments. They didn't make much use of the wheel. They didn't have a lot of metalworking. Obviously, they used gold a lot, but they didn't use much bronze or iron. So a lot of their weapons were obsidian embedded into hardened wood. There are subtle differences if you look through the armies. Some make use of long spears versus swords. There does seem to be a shift around 1300 away from use of the atlatl and into the rise of more melee and impact type troops. So that suggests part of this population move that Dave was talking about beginning to impact things. So there is quite a lot of similarity in some of the warfare styles to some of the hill troops that you find across Europe and the Middle East. So, initially more impetuous swordsmen, but then perhaps a rise of impact. So, a bit similar to some of the Italian hill tribe lists. The big missing, obviously, is cavalry, but quite a variety. If you like bow, if you like impact, if you like two-handed weapons, you can find all of those in there, but no armor really. So that makes for a fairly limited version of rock, paper, scissors within these lists.
Yeah, you've only got two of those things. It makes it tricky. So if we look at the way the army lists in Art de la Guerre are divided, you've got the ancient, and it's just saying what's the best one to drop these Meso-American armies into if you were including them. Clearly, they work as a standalone period, but there's a limited number of people, at the moment with these armies. But if you look at the list breakdown, you've got the ancient period, which is Babylon, Egypt, Middle East, and just about into the beginnings of the Celts and the Mycenaeans. You've got the classical period with the Macedonians, Carthage, start of Rome. You then get the Roman period where you start getting a lot more Goths and Sassanids and Parthians and things like that. And I guess I'm assuming that once you get beyond that, there are just too many cavalry with pointed sticks who will just run these people down. It's difficult to almost look to see where else they might fit after those first three. But maybe across sort of ancient, classical, and possibly Roman, or possibly some of the subsets of that, where would you say these things are not just going to be a speed bump?
I think unless they're facing good shooting cavalry or impact cavalry / knights, including heavy chariots and cataphracts and all those kind of things, I think they have a good chance. Because if you're against, say, a Celtic heavy cavalryman and you are an impact medium swordsman, well, you get your impact if the heavy cavalry charge you. It's only if the heavy cavalry has impact that you're going to lose that. And you can choose to have quite a lot of impact troops, quite a lot of elite troops, quite a lot of two-handed weapon troops to deal with armor. So I think they're probably, they don't immediately appeal, but I think on reflection, you could make them work in a lot of periods. I mean, you can look at other armies, like, for example, some of the early medieval Irish, where you could make quite a similar looking list and people make it work. It's just obviously, if you're facing mounted, you've really got to be fortunate with the terrain, and you perhaps therefore want to go for one of the lists with high command factors and possibly a strategist, because if you're facing certain troops, you're going to have control of terrain.
Yeah, I guess, is it kind of almost an army full of Almogavars? You know, Dave, I know that's one of your favourite types, but
I think Richard's completely right as usual. I think biblical, they'll work. It's very much like a sea people army, or some of the Egyptian armies. Not okay. The heavy chariots will cause a problem, but you've got armies which are very large. You've just got to put a net out to catch the heavy chariots in. I think, again, another point is Richard's right. If you can. These are armies which, within their own periods, they're not going to worry too much about terrain, because all the Meso-American armies are medium infantry, so it doesn't really matter so much about terrain. In a biblical period, they would want to defend, so you'd probably be trying to put down all 5 pieces of terrain and trying to get as much terrain down. You know, you want all the plantations, fields you can possibly get, then they might work. I'm not sure mountains really help them too much, because it's got difficult terrain.
One question that always strikes me looking at these lists, and particularly with reference to that unique weapon, the atlatl, that is kind of javelin for medium infantry, but not quite in combat. How much better would it be if that had a range of 2 or 3 or 4 even, instead of the kind of the 1 that it has at the moment? Is that, would that make a big difference to it?
It might do, but I think unrealistically so, because it's a little bit like a lightweight peeler, in that its role is to weaken the enemy just prior to contact. It's not a skirmishing weapon, really. It's, in the ideal sense, you move up to within 1 UD, throw them at the pikeman or the non-armored spearmen or whatever that you're facing, hope to wound a third of them, and that just gives you an edge as you then close to contact. I think if you gave them a range of 2, skirmishers wouldn't really be able to stand in front of them, which I don't think would be realistic.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one, isn't it? It might, that you've got to get that balance, I guess, with these rules between the realism versus the on-table reality, and the ability of a pike army or a Roman army to screen its principal combat troops with 2 or 3 or 4 skirmishers and completely negate the one shot that the atlatl gets. Is almost, it may mean that the skirmishers just get driven off, and so your overall effect becomes a bit better.
I've had to think about this and thought, I tended to agree that, okay, we're trying to treat them as peeler, which are weapons which are used just before contact. But I don't think that's actually true. The atlatl is essentially, if you can imagine your arm being your shoulder to your elbow and then your elbow to your hand, it's adding a third part of the arm. So it's actually extending your arm. And what it does is it actually increases the distance you can throw. So I would actually argue, against my first thoughts, that we should be giving them a shot at 2. And I think possibly the reason they've been given a shot at 1 is to make sure the skirmishers do have some sort of influence in the game. But I think they're there to drive off their skirmishers would probably fight on the outside of this army or in terrain purely. I don't think they would be running ahead of the warriors. And I think there would actually be a kind of javelin battle between these warriors before they close to contact, in their own strange manner of trying to take prisoners and
do whatever they do, trying to knock each other out.
We should be doing 2 UDs for shooting, but that's
maybe. And then the other question with these armies that always strikes me is, if you look at them, there is obviously the Texcallans who get Cortes and the Conquistadors, and clearly they won. So that's got to be a good option, and it's something very different to everything else in that period, which makes it interesting as well. But if you're looking at these as a a unique period, a Central American, South American period. Just to do, does allowing that Cortes allied command or internal allied command, or whether it's a subgeneral command, but that internal command of all the conquistadors, because they do have to be all in one command, does that unbalance that army and make it too good for any of the other ones to really deal with? If you gave everybody a free choice of armies in that theme, is it a no-brainer to pick the one army with the conquistadors because of the conquistadors, or are they actually still too small that, in a set-piece battle where there's no pre-game attrition of 90% through illness, that it doesn't actually make much of a difference, and it just is it's a bit of legitimate flavour?
I mean, my view is that it doesn't overbalance it. I mean, there's one mounted unit and a few other units that are basically pretty similar to what, I mean, a crossbow isn't that different to a bow, and one or two units on foot having armor, well, that's a situation we see in many other lists. So I think you can have that without any problem. And I think the rest of the Aztecs and the Mayans have enough other stuff that the Texcallans don't have in the core list, that you could have a very interesting game, without messing with the rules at all.
I definitely agree. I think Hervé's done a good job of not making the conquistadors some sort of like super troops, because there's only 3 fighting troops, 2 bowmen, and a couple of handgunners. I don't think you're going to take the artillery, but you might do. I think it might give flavour to a competition if there are a few of them around, but they're not going to overbalance that army to such an extent that they're going to make it so good that the others don't work.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. Well, I think on that point, maybe let's move on and have a look at some of these lists then.
This means war.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the list, and we've decided to start with the famous one, I guess, which is the Aztecs. Now, this is the list that I pulled together, and this is the list that's based around this interesting challenge that Ian at Fighting 15s gave me, of trying to create a legitimate, viable kind of 200-point list using about 128, 130 figures, then picking out from those from this particular Aztec list. So what I've done, I think, looking at these lists, which are a little bit similar, there's different ways of doing it, but what I've tried to create is, first of all, a big list here, 26, because you are trading that against the ability to, again, you are trading attrition here, and then trying to get a mix of different things in the different commands so that they're not all uniform. You can lead with different things. You do get a little bit of a different flavor with it. So first of all, you're using the Jaguar and Eagle warriors. I've taken them as medium swordsman, 2-handed elite, just to get that extra +1 when they start winning, so that they can carve through things. A couple of skirmishers with bow or sling to screen them, and then 3 of the Atomi, which are medium sword impetuous. So you've got 6 combat troops there. Some of them are medium swordsman impetuous to give you that shock. The others are medium swordsman elite. They still chop. That's a very, very dangerous command, and you throw that into pretty much anything. Well, it's because anything you'd find in this period, but you'd have a go at Romans with that, to be honest, full frontally. The second one, competent general, again, part of a strategy to get the initiative up to 2, because this Aztec army has a +4 that it can do. Couple of warrior priests, medium swordsman impact elite. 4 in this one of the medium swordsman with atlatl. I think medium swordsman is one of those things that we've kind of talked about in some of the previous discussions. They can, by standing there and shooting, they can resist or negate somebody else's impetuosity and take that away. and with atlatl, maybe they get to do a bit of shooting and as we say, ding people off a little bit before, and then 3 skirmishers again to screen them or provide some extra width. But it's another block of 6, but not, this one doesn't have any impetuosity on it. And then the third one is pretty much the same, using the Kuichik shock troops, 2 of those, 4 more of the warriors. That's sort of soaking up your minimum on those standard warriors, the guys with atlatl, and 3 skirmishers with bow. So it's 3 commands of 6 combat troops, and one of them is very much go forward and be the cutting edge, and the other one is designed to absorb impetuous impact, and between the atlatl shooting and a couple of elite ones to hopefully be as good or better than what's there. Looking at it, I think there are some fairly straightforward ways to do these lists, and this is the way that jumped out at me. But here's 3 blocks of 6. They're going forwards. 2 of them can hang back. They've all got extra width. They've all got some skirmisher cover, but they do slightly different functions.
I think my first question, and I think this is one which is probably going to be a question, I think that this is a very interesting period. If you could actually get a competition together with 6 armies of this sort, it would be fascinating to see what came out of it. And to be honest, I would sit here and I wouldn't have a clue. Would you sit there and want to go for loads of movements and pits to get your staff moving around? I mean, they're all going to be quite large armies. I think one thing which stands out to me is almost all the armies have got a choice in the Eagle Warriors and the Warrior Priests of, do you take them as impact elite or 2-handed weapon elite? Now, in the list that I've gone for 2-handed weapon elite, because although the impact has the initial impact in the first round, the 2-handed weapon will work constantly through any combat. Yeah. And I think that might give you a better chance in the long run. So I think I would go for 2-handed weapon. I don't think terrain is going to matter much because you're all medium.
Not at all. Not at all.
Shooting mountain and things like that, you don't want. So I think there's going to be a situation where you decide to be on the attack, take the command points to get your troops on the attack, and use lots of command to move forward quickly and get that initial rush of outflanking, trying to move. So I think the rule set actually does work really well in terms of Meso-American warfare.
Yeah, those 2 differences. Richard, what do you think looking at this list? Do you think it's pretty straightforward? It's it's trying to be a good basic core without going too overboard on anything too clever?
I think that's exactly how I would describe it. I think it's a very solid starter list. It's got a range of the common troop types, gives you some skirmishers to slow down. It's got good command compared to a lot of the armies which only have 3. You've got some shooting capability. So it's a good core because it will suit also a number of styles of play, in that you can do the charge kind of approach, but you can also do the jab, jab, jab type approach. So I think it'd be a great place for somebody to put their toe into the water with Meso-American warfare.
Yeah, and one of the other things that is slightly odd about this list, because it's a factor that we've never really had to factor in before. When I was putting it together for Ian to use as the basis for this, ready-made 40 quid army, part of it's thinking, could this also work as a basis for other rule sets that have unit-based, compositions? So having clearly the Jaguar and Eagle Warriors, you're allowed 3 units of them. That's 18 figures. That's it. Using 3 of the atomic, it gives people, if you're using a different rule set, it's an 18 or it's a 12, or it's getting those multiples. And some of the skirmishers, so you've got 8 skirmishers, that's giving you 16 figures. So there is a slight element of thinking those light infantry bowmen do have to be in a 16, but actually that's not really compromised its legitimacy, because I think there's going to be terrain around and people are going to be sort of spreading this stuff about. and you do want to screen from the atlatl, and you do want to give those 3 blocks of 6 some overlaps once they start getting into combat, or you want to be occupying terrain to use it. So whilst it was a slightly artificial constraint, I don't think it's it's unbalanced this in any way, shape or form. I think in some ways it would have been nice to include more warrior priests because they're a bit more colorful, and I guess do you swap them out? But they are pretty expensive, and you do want these armies to be big. And were you adding to this with a bit of extra purchases, I suspect what you would do is pick up some more of the warrior priests and possibly even just use Jaguar Eagle warrior figures for them, just because they're kind of cool. They're the cooler troops in the list to do so. So that was certainly the idea for this one.
War.
So let's have a look at another Aztec list then. And Richard, I think this is one that you've put together. I can see that you've got initiative of 2 as well. I guess when you've got 4 there, you want to be doing that. And yours is tiny, 24. You've not made 26. But so talk us through your 3 commands, because this one is a little bit different to the way that I put mine together.
So yeah, I took a different sort of approach to this. And said, right, well, what really makes the Aztecs stand out for me amongst all the lists is the high number of elite medium swordsman impact. So I want to get as many of those as I can. So I've gone for 2 commands that are basically get stuck in unless you're facing impetuous, in which case get in their face and wait for them to attack you. And 1 kind of messing about command. So the second command would probably be in the middle. It's got an included ordinary general and 5 medium swordsman impact elite. So I'm assuming that in period, my opponent doesn't have a lot of shooting. If he does, he's only got bow. So I'm on a +2 differential against that. So I'm not going to screen them. I'm just going to get them stuck in his face. The first command is capable of more maneuver. It's got a brilliant general. It's got 3 impact elite and 3 impact, and a couple of mediocre medium swordsmen. And they're there to, in an emergency, fill in a hole, go round a flank. If I'm holding back another command next to it, maybe they can threaten a flank. And a couple of skirmishers, just in case there's some difficult going on the flank, to help pad that out and just give it some flexibility. Then the third command, again, has a brilliant commander. 4 of the atlatl swords, 2 without, simply because I couldn't afford the points. And then some bowmen. I've chosen to take the Otomi as an elite bowman because I'm thinking, well, there's a lot of medium troops here with no armor. Maybe a lot of things will only be on a protection of 1. If I can get an elite shooter with some support, maybe I can make somebody really think twice. So, and with 9 troops capable of standing in the line of battle, I think that's quite handy. So compared to your army, Tim, although there's 24 versus 26, I've actually got 22 width because I've only got the 2 skirmishers.
Yep.
So I think although it's a smaller army, it's got a longer line of battle. So I as I say, very much one for fighting Meso-American warfare, but I think this is going to give hopefully people a hard time. And you get more colour by having more of the fancy troops.
Yeah, which is all good as well. No, I think it's interesting looking at the 2. There is that. I think we talked about it in the the inverted commas history section. It's what is the role of shooting to erode the enemy before combat, and I think this would be fascinating. This is a better in combat, or certainly in the first round of combat army, because you're right, there's more impact and there's a little bit more elite as well. However, it with no skirmishers, you're taking a call that you can get through the skirmishers, and it would be that interesting trade-off between, does throwing out 8 bowmen light foot in front of an army slow you down, give you room to maneuver behind it, ping off a few little hits, give you a little bit of extra width, whereas this one concentrates the shooting in those 1 elite and the 2 normal bowmen. But then, as you say, it's about toughing out the shooting and getting in there. So you do actually, it's paper, scissors, stone, but not the normal paper and scissors and stone. You know, eight
Yes.
skirmishers would not normally be one of those options in other periods, but in this much more limited period, you've just got to find a different paper, really. I don't know, Dave, what's your thoughts on this one?
I just look at this, it's fascinating because you sit here and think, oh, only 24 units, when, as we'll see from some of the other lists, we've got 27s, 28s, 29s and things like that. But then Richard has only gone for 2 skirmishers. So in actual fact, he's got as many fighting troops as some of the other armies, which are padded out with skirmishers. So then you have the issue. Then I've done a list for Texcallan, and I've put a unit in the centre of the army, which is unreliable and fairly weak, so I can attack on both wings, which is a standard way of wargaming as such. But then Richard is going to go straight through the middle of my army with 5 elite infantries.
Yeah.
And then I'm just sitting here thinking, bloody hell, you know, in the army list I've got for Texcallan, I've got 4 medium swordsmen and a mediocre bowman, which I'm going to put down first, unreliable in the centre of the table. So I get to look at where the rest of his army is. But that is just not going to stand up to that central command. And I'm sitting here thinking, actually, this would be a fascinating competition, because composition of the army, who puts down first? No one's going to have massive initiative because there's no light horse. So who wins the initiative is going to be a bit of a complete dice fest. So there's going to be a lot of issues and interesting points. And again,
some interesting points, and then a lot of carnage when they get into combat as well from both sides.
The question of, do you go impact or do you go two-handed weapon? And I thought go two-handed weapon, but Richard's going impact, and I think, you know what? I think that's right.
you can argue the toss either way on it for sure. Yeah. No, that's good actually. Given the limited number of options in these armies, that is actually quite a different way of doing it. And I think, you know, some of the just buying a few more extra packs of the more colorful warriors or some of the bonus packs works as well for that. That's kind of neat. In fact, you know, with all the bowmen, the 16 bowmen in that initial army pack, you could kind of deploy them as the Atomi and the Tarascans. You most of the ways there anyway, aren't you? With having 18 figures there, and you got 18 plus another 4, so you've got 22. Yeah, that's pretty close to it to give you that other option of doing it as well. Interesting.
This means war.
Okay, so let's move on to the Texcallans, or Texcallans, I think, as it used to be in some other sets of rules. I'm not sure if there's a opinion and a Wade Giles version of pronouncing Meso-American armies that I've missed. But looking at this one again, this is one where, you know, clearly you've got those same core of warriors that appear in the Aztec one, and you do have that same sort of mix of military orders as well. But you do get some kind of different troop types as well. You've got medium spearmen here, and you've got swordsman bowman mix as well, those mixed units. And again, you know, we've talked about our medium spearmen or our medium swordsmen, just kind of sort of the underloved troop types at the moment. But in this period where there are limited opponents and clearly only one mounted unit is you could ever possibly meet, they do become kind of much more generic troops with a function. So what I've done here is really go for scale on this one. This is 28, which is starting to get up to that, oh my lord, it's 30 sort of number. The initiative is what the initiative is. You can't do a lot with it, and I've done a very straightforward breakdown of 3 competent generals. So first command is the biggie, and this is just about getting in 3 medium swordsman impact elite, the military orders, and then supporting them with some extra width with some of the medium swordsman atlatl. There's 4 of those on either wing, and light infantry bow, 4 of the skirmishers, a couple of bowmen skirmishers. So it's a big old command that either pushes forwards with the swordsman atlatl to stand and receive it, and then drives somewhere else with its medium swordsman impact elite to support another command, or you're going forward with a block of effectively 7 sort of combat troops, and you're leaving your warriors with bow and your skirmishers to protect and support them. So whilst it's a big command, some of them are going to be kind of static, was sort of what I was thinking. You know, I think there's probably an argument to make that a brilliant general and downgrade some of the other ones, looking at it kind of now in retrospect, but that's not going to change the overall points balance. The second one is again, this is playing this army as a absorb an enemy charge and hopefully use shooting, use atlatl, use skirmishers to negate impact. And you're trying to say, look, I'm going to take on impact or impetuous troops with a line of swordsmen, and I'm going to work quite hard to chip something off you all the way. So 4 swordsmen with atlatl, 4 more skirmishers, 2 bowmen here as well. So you've actually got 10 troops there who all shoot. And in the first command, you've got another 10 who shoot. And your final command, throwing in some of the warriors with long spear and 2 mixed units of swordsmen and bowmen. So suddenly this army of 28 has got 22 shooting units in a period in which some armies are not going to turn up with much skirmishers and are turning up with a lot of medium infantry. So yeah, it is planning to receive a charge, and this is sort of slightly trying to achieve something different in terms of play style as well, but to use the things that this army does bring to the table, which is the large numbers of swordsmen atlatl and the mixed units and things like that, to create something that plays differently to some of the other lists. I don't know, Richard, you're looking pensive. What's your thoughts on this?
I think, as you say, I mean, the shooting's great, particularly if you've got a reasonable amount of command with a competent in each. If you can kink the line a bit so that the enemy can't just line up and charge, but has got to proceed a little more carefully, so you get longer to shoot. I think that's good. The only thing I would perhaps change is I'm looking at the size of that first command, which has an included general, and I'm just thinking maybe
I think that's probably not right.
I'd put more in the third command, which only has 5 troops. And I often, if I've got an included general, I quite often put that command in the middle, because if it's a flank and he gets stuck in command, and you've got some bowmen or skirmishers hanging out that then can't move, they can become a bit of a soft target for the opponent. But I think the troop mix is great. Again, in period, I wouldn't be so in love. I mean, the medium spears are nice to have because they're different, but if there might be enemy impetuous swordsmen, I'm not sure I would be so keen on going with spearmen.
Yeah, no, I think of just trying something different. And
yeah, sure.
And you're trying to, I suppose you're trying to run them at that. Suddenly, if they do find that they're fighting Cortez, it's their happy day, isn't it? That's exactly what they're there for.
Yes.
Suddenly it's Christmas time for them. Dave, what are you thinking on this one?
I think the lists are really well designed to reflect the Meso-American. The Texcallan are the traditional enemy. As I say, every year the Aztecs surrounded them, came in for their flower war where they drag off prisoners. So it's a weaker army because it doesn't have as many elites and things like that. But it has got an interesting difference that it's got bowmen, whereas the Aztecs don't have bowmen. So I think I would go with the bowmen and see what happens. See what happens. Do the mixed units work? Do the things like that. My only comment with the list would be that there's 8 skirmishers, and okay, you've got 28 in the army, but 8 of them are skirmishers. And I think you see in the Texcallan army I've got, okay, I've only got 25, but I've only got 2 skirmishers, so I've ended up with 23 battle troops where you've only got 20. There's an interesting situation is, you know, can you get the skirmishers round the back of the enemy quick enough to help do, you know, to get in extra overlaps and things like that?
Yeah. Well, I think Lightfoot are an interesting troop type in that there's kind of there's sort of a magic number. You know, if you've got 2 or 3, that's kind of all right. And then you get up to sort of 5, 6, and it doesn't make much difference. But then when you start getting 7, 8, 9 or more, suddenly it's a problem for the enemy to deal with, just because there is so many of them, and you know, they're popping up everywhere, and your volume of plink 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 shooting does start to add up, particularly as say in this period when all your opponents are just medium foot, there's no armor around. Okay, there's a few elites, and possibly, you know, any enemy with 2 or 3 Lightfoot that picking it the traditional way, 8 of them are going to start bullying that and potentially chipping away at it quite quickly. So, you know, it's just trying to think of different ways to choose the list to maximize the unique characteristics about it.
Yeah, and the other advantage you have by taking so many light infantry is that you can surprise the opponent by going for mountains, which most people aren't going to bother with. Then you get some real advantages there, and also even in the plains you can go for more terrain, whereas your opponent may think, well, most of this is rough terrain, I'm medium foot, it doesn't really care. But it makes a big difference if you're 4 skirmishers versus 3 medium swordsmen in a field. Well, then they can stand and have a chance, whereas in the open they're dead.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do think in this period the skirmishers are a lot more tactically interesting than they might be in some others.
It's something you were thinking about as we're talking. It's like you could actually, skirmishers could end up being really important. If a skirmisher hits into the rear of a unit, it takes off another level. It's really, you know, if you can overwhelm the other person's skirmishers and get around the back of his army, then you're going to make a difference in the combat. And if, you know, taking the camp becomes, you know, there's no defended
there's no fortified camps. Yeah,
fortified camps, exactly. There's a lot of questions. You could actually sit your center of your army back on your own back edge, put your skirmishers halfway across the table, slow the opponent's army completely down to get into your back edge, and hope maybe fold your Lightfoot round the back and then start charging them into the rear of the enemy. You know? Yeah,
they, you know, in a world without light horse, they're my theory is they're almost light horse.
Yeah.
You know,
they are. The only difference is, though, in a world without heavy infantry, if you bring them within 2 to shoot, unless you've got a contiguous line, which again, advantage of having 8, the enemy can slip a medium swordsman behind you, stop you evading. So you do need to use them with a high level of command, I think, in order to keep them safe.
In decent blocks. Okay, well, look, Dave, let's have a look at your Texcallan list.
This means war.
Dave, Texcallan from you, 1502. I think that's technically in a different rule set, but why not? Go late with these guys.
Oh, so 1402, I think, yeah.
1402, possibly. So you've gone 25, half-hearted, but as you said, it's a lot more combat troops. So 3 competent commanders again, none of them included, and you've got a 10, a 10, and a 5. So talk us through, run us through each of these 10s and then the 5 and how you see this list being used.
Okay, so I don't think the initiative matters. It's going to be a flip of a coin unless you've got a strategist in there, which is going to really take down the army. So you're going to either attacking or defending. It could be, well, I think in a competition of say 5 games, you may be defending twice and sacking twice and one a flip of a coin, so it doesn't really matter. You don't have as many elites as the other people. So my first command, I've split the command and control equally across all 3 commands. I made them all 3 competent. So I'm going to try and get the maneuvers. You know, there may be some situations where you throw a 6 on the pit dice and you may get a chance to maneuver someone out into a position of strange position. And that's where I'm using the bowmen. I think the bowmen are going to be there to offer targets to the enemy whilst I try and maneuver the warriors to get into advantages, hence putting some mediocre bowmen in there, which is an old trick, and, you know, combining mediocre bowmen and good bowmen. So the bowmen are going to get their shots, whatever. They're going to get at least 1 shot. If they drag something down, they've got more of a possibility of surviving.
Are you seeing those 4 bowmen being used as a block, or are you seeing 2 2s on either side of your block of 6 warriors?
No, I'm trying to turn the army into 4 commands again, as usual, one of our old tricks. That second command, I'm going to probably put down the replaced archers, the half spear, half bow, in a block, offer them as a target, hopefully, you know, and try and maneuver the other 6 in that group as a separate entity, give the pips to the 4 warriors and the skirmishers to try and create a V, so, you know, people can't get into the archers because they're being threatened in the flank by the warriors. And yet that gives the bowmen more chance to do their thing and do their damage. I think if you create a V with ADLG armies, you can prevent someone charging into the front of your weaker troops and allow them to do the damage. I've put all the elites together with enough warriors with them. And again, I've offered 4, I put 4 bowmen there to put down a lot of bow fire, I hope, whilst the pips are used by the 6 warriors, the military orders and the warriors.
Oh, I see. So you've really got your first 2 commands of 10 are 2 commands each. One is, the first one is 6 warriors, half elite, half normal, and then the other bit is 4 bowmen, half ordinary, half mediocre. Your second one is 4 warriors and a couple of skirmishers, and then your second part of command 2 is 4 of the mixed bowmen. And then I think looking at that final one, you've got 4 more warriors and a bowman. So you've got, if my maths are right, 22 shooting units here, which is quite remarkable.
That's the idea. Is that, you know, the Texcallans not going to be as good as the Aztec in front fight, so it's going to have to fire. So everybody's going to fire, and I've tried to sort of pad it out, make sure I've got enough fighting troops to extend the line, put some mediocres in there. Hopefully they'll get around the edge. And I think striking people in the flanks or getting round the back of their army is going to be a major factor in these battles.
Okay, so again, like me, you've gone Texcala as a shooting army. Richard, what's your thoughts on that one?
So I think it's a good way to play it. The only thing I would think about with that same troop mix, I would think about moving 3 of the bowmen from command 1 to command 3 and making the generals in command 2 and 3 brilliant and including the general in the first command. It makes it a little bit less flexible in a way, but I think when you're using commands as 2 blocks, it's really helpful to have a brilliant, because then you've got for sure a pip for each block and 1 pip left over if you need to do a flank or something else. Because I think, it gives you more of a balance of numbers perhaps across the commands, because I think otherwise, I'm looking at it, your command 3 has got a competent general with 5 troops. I think you could optimize the balance slightly differently, but that's just my style of play, not yours. So what do I know?
I think these points, I think at the end of a weekend's competition, if you did find 6 people who had 6 Meso-American armies, you'd be sitting there at the end of the weekend scratching your head and going, well, that one was not what I expected, and it was completely different to what I expected, and it's blown me away. Whereas I've done, you know, I think it's going to be a really fascinating
This
project.
means war. This means war.
Okay, so third one of the list that I've cooked up for fighting 15s here. This is the sort of the early period, even though it kind of feels a bit similar, the Zapotec and mixed tech army. So this one, not quite as big as some of these kind of monsters, and a little bit lighter on the skirmishes for me. There's only 6 in this one, and this I think is getting a bit back to that sort of Aztec-y thing, but still with quite a lot of shooting, or an awful lot of shooting, really, in that there's only 3 units out of this 26 who don't shoot, but there's still a few more elites to scatter around this one as well. Didn't quite manage to get this to the 200 points, but that's doable. You could uninclude some of the generals or something like that. But so this is a 10, a 10, and a 6. So this, I felt, was an army that really, because of the options, sort of suited being a bit more straightforward, that 3 balanced commands approach to it. And again, looking at, it would be uninclude the generals, wouldn't it? So what I've got in first command, 3 elite medium swordsmen. It's a shame that they don't have all that kind of, you know, clever impact stuff, but elite with atlatl medium swordsman is about resisting someone else's charge and chipping the way with a lot of shooting. 3 more medium swordsman atlatl just to pump out the shooting, gives you a combat width of 6th. 2 bowmen to take that width up to 8. You operate them together, it's giving you another better chance of of pinging people down, and a couple of slingers as skirmishers as well. They're fighting off the 8 skirmishers in my other armies. The second command is pretty similar. It's, instead of the 3 medium swordsman elite, I've gone for 3 medium swordsman 2-handed weapon, the nobles and warriors, to take to give it a different, that theory, Dave, you know, is it impact, or is it surviving the first round through your skirmishers, through your shooting, through your atlatl, through your elite, and then winning in the long run with some of those. 3 of the normal warriors with atlatl, a couple of bowmen, and a couple of slingers as well. And then after that, it's just sort of, what do you do next? And it's just a smaller command doing something very, very similar, which is 4 more warriors with atlatl and 2 with slingers. So you really are, in this one, you've got 6, 9, 13 atlatl shooters and 4 bowmen. That's 17 units here, which are shooting at a base factor of 0 to try and pump out some damage on the opponent before they get in. And it's a strange way, again, you're thinking of absorb someone else's impact and sort of start to grind them down or swamp them, but without those impetuous troops and things like that. You do have actually a lot of maneuverability with medium foot. In other rules, they would have been drilled or whatever. They're non-impetuous. They can move and slide and spread out and things like that. Possibly you do try and use a bit more of the terrain here and to make those armies that are reliant on driving forwards with some real sort of strong strike troops, pull them into different shapes and try and get them to break up and chase you around a bit in a maybe a more stylized form of warfare. So I think, Dave, have you put together one of these lists for us? What do you think of this one?
I kind of looked to the other ones, the Chininsak and the Tax and things like that. To be honest, I'm kind of looking at this first. I'm thinking medium swordsman atlatl elite. Wow, I'm thinking I haven't sort of noticed that combination. They're only going to get 1 shot with the atlatl, but then it's elite. Well,
you know, I think in this period, these armies are going to come together, and everybody on each side has only 3 hits. There's quite a bit of impact. There's quite a bit of 2-handed weapon. So those combats are not necessarily going to go on for too long. So having an elite shot with the atlatl, knocking 1 hit off 3 hit units is hugely significant, really. So, you know, it's only the 1 hit, but if it works, it really, really makes a difference. So stack up with that if you can.
It's kind of throwing up a question of like, do you offer up some troops as things to get killed whilst you maneuver with the other things? I think there's going to be a very much of a situation in these games where you come up, pin the enemy, shoot with your atlatl, but keep something else spare to try and get round. So, extending the line is going to become really interesting. One unit round the side is going to make one hell of a difference. And a skirmisher as an overlap is going to make a big difference as well.
Are you saying that deliberate sacrifice is part of the military culture that the way these armies are used? I can see where you're going with that one.
The blood's involved as well. Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Yeah, a blood sacrifice to help you win the combat or win the war.
So definitely.
Yeah.
I think the thing of creating a V. I mean, I've said about it earlier. If you create a command which can create a V, if you say you can have. In this army, the 2 bowmen and the 3 warriors can come forward and pin the enemy to their front, being 5 wide, whilst your 3 elite guys are folding round the side in a V. That can create so many problems for an opponent. It's just not true.
With a slide, a wheel, a 3 MU movement or a 3 UD movement, you're getting a long way to make sure you do get those stacked up shots in there. I don't know, Richard, what are you thinking? I guess this is a little similar to the way the Texcallans or my Texcallans were put together in terms of its basic concept.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is, and we're kind of discovering this as we talk, but we're seeing 2 basic approaches to constructing this. One is heavy emphasis on melee, and the other is a heavy emphasis on a bit of shooting followed by combat. And I think, therefore, what's interesting in all of that is, I think in all of these armies, I would be a big fan of high command points, because I think in both of them, therefore, maneuver is going to be important, because a lot of them are very maneuverable troops. And I think for the charging type armies, they're going to ideally try and get a waterway down to narrow the width. And so I think unincluding the generals here would be a goal of mine, because
I think we actually looking at it, take that as a given. Because the army budget's got the ability to do it anyway, so for sure.
Yes, because I think if you are relying on blunting the edge by some shooting, you really want to be operating each command in 2 or 3 blocks. So being able to have, where possible, a few brilliant commanders, and not including is great for impact type troops, impetuous impact. I think for others, unless the command is small, there's a danger that the general ends up in the wrong place and you can't really move him.
True. No, that's true. Okay then. Well, that's covered the early period. Let's move on and have a look at another one.
This means war.
So as we get into the final stage here now, Dave, you've pulled up one of the different lists out of here, which is the Chinantecs from, again, the very back end of the period. This we have talked about these armies being similar but different, and finding a different way of paper, scissors, stone. But this one kind of feels like it's almost the 4th thing in your game of paper, scissors, stone here, which is kind of fascinating. And you've got a 1 initiative. You've already talked about initiative being neither here nor there with these armies, and an enormous 29 unit one that has got 7 of those as skirmishers, and this magical troop type of pikemen seem to be scattered through it as well. So your 7, your 13, and your 9, 2 ordinary and a brilliant. Talk us through these commands in order then, and what's in them, and how you see them working.
Okay, so I mean, so the Chinantec is an army you actually do see in competitions, in open competitions. I've actually seen it at the Worlds, not very successfully, I have to say, but it's a very, very negative army. It's only got a command of 2, which is why the brilliant generals, and it's got 2 ordinaries. Before anybody comments on the lack of command and control, that's what its problem is. But it's got a magic troop type of mediocre pikemen, which I've come up against the Scottish armies. They're a bloody nightmare just in themselves. So I've gone heavy on those, tried to get as much skirmisher in there as well to pad it out so it doesn't die too quickly. But you're going to be looking at 12 pike in the center of the army or somewhere with troops to run around the side. So it's got, I think the pike can actually do quite well in themselves here, because if you've got opens, I'm going to go for mountain if I possibly can. I've got the skirmisher to hold the difficult terrain. That means that we're going to be in open areas, not too much medium rough ground. So I want my pike to go forward and do the fighting, pin the enemy. Plus, they've got a lot more attrition value. They've got an extra level of attrition to the enemy.
True. Yeah.
2 in the first place. So, you're hoping they're going to do some damage. But then I'm going to try and run around the edges with my nobles. I've got 4 of them in one group. And I've gone for the 2-handed weapon, which I think is superior still. And then I've got plenty of bowmen in there to run around on their own to try and take advantage of things.
No, that's it's I'm still trying to get my head around seeing a different troop type to medium foot swordsman, which is kind of weird. Richard, I don't know, have you ever played against we're almost talking about the Scots and the Low Countries with that huge block of inferior pike. Is that something that you've played against or looked at?
Yeah, I mean, it can be, it is a classic sort of rock, paper, scissors type army in that it's wonderful against mounted. And as Dave said, you've got to protect it against enemy shooting. I think his point about it having the extra cohesion is very valid. I think it would be a really useful army in this competition. I think that you'd really have to think through its vulnerability to terrain compared to all the other armies. And your opponent is probably going to guess and certainly by round 2 or 3 of a competition, they would know that you've gone for the pike and is therefore going to try and maximize the terrain. And I therefore, I might be thinking of, do I really want 2 6s or do I want 3 4s? So that each block is on a slightly narrower frontage. And does each one want a couple of medium swordsmen with it? And then maybe bunch the bowmen somewhere. Because I think that there's a really tasty army here. And I think what you've got is definitely the basis of it, but I might redistribute a couple of the thing. And interestingly, you do have to use all of them of the same type. So there is, it is a bit of a challenge, but whether those nobles would be better off supporting the pike rather than in a command on their own would be the only thing I would want to think through. Because you could then have a noble in the middle of a pike block as an included general, which could also be interesting.
Yeah, I think that was probably my thought as well. So I've used the Scots as well, and I think the Scots, because they get the Highlander allies, or is it the Galwegians, that does naturally kind of get itself to a very similar structure, because you have to put all the Highlander sword bowmen in one command with that Scots army, and the Low Countries is slightly different. But I do wonder with this, because the pikeman is the unique troop type, I'd almost be tempted to trim down the number of bowmen, because actually as well, and put more pikemen into it, and a couple of commands with with 2 of the medium swordsmen, because they're still very pokey. You know, elite medium swordsman, turned weapon, embedded general,
And 4 of them.
and get 4 of them. But if you had 2 2s and maybe fielded the pike as 3 5s, you know, because if the pike is what's good, go big on the pike. I'm not quite so sure that 2 bowmen, 3 bowmen, 4 bowmen is quite doing enough, and I'd be tempted to have more pikemen. But again, it's a very different army, and mediocre pikemen in enormous numbers is a very, very tough troop type, because they're starting at factor 2. The mediocrity rarely comes into it. It's only when they're scoring enormous factors. They do have those 4 hits. They'd be very hard to grind down, but they're also very tempting for elite impact to have a good old go at, because you think that you can do them, but you are sort of grinding them down, and they only cost 8 points versus your elite impact stuff is 10, 11, and you do sort of swamp people with the rest of the army.
In each command, because I think the most you're going to face of impact swordsman is 4, so you're always going to have an overlap, and once those troops come into your pike, that leaves the skirmishers completely free to maneuver with all the pips, and hopefully they're going to start shedding off on their own way. I think it's definitely a pokey army. The thing it lacks is command and control, because it's only got initiative of 2.
Yeah. But equally, those pikemen don't need a lot. They're going forwards, and when they get in combat, they're rolling dice and saying, "I've got 4 hits, and my base factor is 2." So there's not a lot of generalship kind of needed there, really. So, no, interesting army.
This means war.
So finally then, I think this is the last one of the ones that I've kind of cooked up for Fighting 15s, which is a Maya list, and another 26. And I think this is much more, Richard, you'll like this one. There's a lot of kind of combat here going on, and not too much faffing around and waiting. So this is a list that gets all sorts of different troop types. And I've kind of gone for punch, but a little bit of variety as well. And it's sticking some combat troops in people's faces, but then having enough maneuverability to exploit flanks as well. So what you've got here is a 9 and a 10 with, again, I've just split competent commanders here. There's maybe an argument for making one brilliant, but 2 medium swordsman impact elite nobles, 2 medium swordsman turned weapon, ordinary ones, the nobles again. That's 4 very good combat troops. 1 other medium swordsman mediocre, which is that that reserve or that extra width, and a couple of bowmen, one ordinary, 1 mediocre, and a couple of slingers as well. So this is really a 4 quality infantry delivery weapon with 3 supporting troops and a couple of skirmishers. But you're getting those good troops in, and using the fact that you're committing 4 good troops out of a command of 9 to give you the resilience to allow that 200 weapon or that eliteness to work. The second command, very, very similar, only sort of marginally bigger. The same mix of 2 medium swordsman impact elite. This one I've gone all impact, so the nobles and medium swordsman impact as well, a bit more punch. A medium swordsman 3 bowmen here, just again a medium swordsman mediocre, medium swordsman impact. This really is going to dominate terrain, and 3 bowmen, 2 ordinary, 1 mediocre is starting to put out quite a lot of shooting, and a couple of slingers as well. And then looking at the one of these lists is, what do they get that's unusual, and why are you going to pick this over everything else? And the Mayans get elite javelinmen, which the shooting is good if you're fighting a base factor of 0 and you're elite. That's pretty cool. They can sort of stand up to other things a lot better in rough terrain. You're assuming that other people's really good combat troops are going to be charging down the open and trying to get into combat. So when elite javelinmen, which is an almost unknown troop type, can sit in terrain or up a hill, even impact swordsmen are going to, normal impact swordsmen are going to think twice. And you add to that 4 of the Toltec mercenaries. medium swordsman impact elite, they're really that's really dangerous, but something that can very well go into terrain and support their flanks, and then a light infantry bow as well. So here you've got 4, 4, and 4 get into combat troops. You've got 2, 4, 8 elite combat troops and a couple of elite javelin as well that are there. So 10 of these are elite out of a 26. And I thought this is actually quite an interesting army that looking at it, you think there's a lot I could do here. There's a lot of clever things I could pull together.
Yeah, I agree. And it kind of would be a classical Indian army's nightmare.
Yeah, it's absolutely. Yeah, this would shred some elephants and things, wouldn't it? And if there were any elephants in South America, which I'm not sure the archaeological record supports really.
There were earlier on, but
I suppose so. Yeah, probably all got eaten by somebody and sacrificed. But
those atlatls had done them in.
Yeah, the atlatls had done them in, even at one UD range. But I don't know, Dave, do you fancy using this? There's a lot of kind of fiddly about stuff here.
I really fancy the elite javelinmen. I think that's a great treat. But in the list I did for mine, I put them as light infantry javelin, because I think they would just completely dominate rough terrain. I like this army. I think it's got a lot going for it. I'm just still stumped why the two of you have gone for medium swordsman impact. Just because
I think we just want to get to the bar quicker than you, Dave. Really, that's possibly
it. In my experience, you've got to look at. Depends on the impact. If they end up fighting something that is, say, a medium swordsman atlatl, they're +1 with eliteness at impact. If you win that first round, you're +1 all of the time. Now, if it's one-on-one, the odds don't favour you that much. If you're 5-on-5, statistically, you're going to win 3 to 4 of those combats, and you are going to take that command down in another 2 rounds, and you've blown away a whole command.
Yeah, no, I'm thinking the two-handed weapon, you get the eliteness of the two-handed weapon throughout the combat. And that
can work too.
Elite on elite and things like that. So
I think there's actually an argument that the two-handed weapon might be better in an open period, as a choice, because what else you're going to be fighting, and you're going to fight more armored troops. So you would say, if you were using this in an open period, these are two-handed weapon guys, and if you're using it in a Meso-American period, you'd use them as impact, possibly a little bit more. But it's just, what's the spirit of the army? What is it trying to do? And I think, again, it's a different set of paper, scissors, stone, and one of those options is resilience and winning in the slightly longer run, although there's not much time when they're all 3s and there's a lot of impact around. So it's a different way of doing it, but it is choosing 3 different types of paper, scissors, stone just for this sort of Meso-American sort of small world, really.
I've just thought of something else that's just completely occurred to me. If you find you've got more light, if you know you've got, I've sat there and thought, no, don't take light infantry because there's no need to have them, sort of thing. But if you have got more light infantry than the opponent and you take mountains, then you've got difficult terrain runways, which are almost going to guarantee you get round the back of the opponent.
Yep.
So there's incredibly weird things in this, fascinating, absolutely fascinating to play.
This means war.
Okay, so we're sneaking in an extra one for you as a bonus here, or possibly I forgot that we were going to do it and rounded it out just before that clip of music. So, Rich, this is your Mayan list, initiative of 1. You've gone 27 here. The question is obviously, what have you done with the javelin men? Where are they? And I can see you've gone light infantry javelin. But talk us through your thinking on putting this one together.
Yeah, so I think a bit like Dave was saying, I thought in this list it has light infantry javelin, which a number of the others don't have. It has forest instead of mountain. And I just thought, okay, this is an opportunity to to try and use that to dominate difficult going and try and hope to have some difficult going. So a bit similar to yours, I've gone for a mix of impact and two-handed weapon, but I've concentrated mine into 2 commands. So the first command is 4 elite medium swordsmen impact, 2 two-handed weapons, 2 mediocre swordsmen, and 2 elite light infantry javelin under a competent general. Whereas the second command is 4 impact elite, 2 heavy weapons, and 2 light infantry bow. So again, 12 frontage combat, the mediocre swordsman and the elite light javelin to give me some capability to probe around flanks. And then the third command, 4 ordinary bowmen and a mediocre bowman with a couple of medium swordsmen and a couple of light infantry javelin. So very much something where you're looking to put down, as we've discussed before, with bowmen, once you've got 4 or 5 wide, you're putting down quite a long range barrage of fire there that opponents know they're going to have to be facing for 2, 3, maybe 4 rounds, with the idea of the medium swordsman and the light infantry javelin to really kind of push up ahead, slow the enemy down, and just make them a bit more cautious about flat out charging the bowman, so that again you can just apply that bow fire over more turns. But that whole command there is to distract a wing of the enemy while the other troops do the damage in the center and on the other flank.
That's actually very different, isn't it? Thinking of a good spot there with the forest as an unusual terrain piece that just does give you some different options. And again, I was just attached to how can I make those Zeinbob as good as possible and make them elite javelinmen, because that's unique. But it's a very, very good thing that in a period with limited number of skirmishers, light infantry javelin elite will absolutely shred anyone else's skirmish screen and can stand pretty decently against other troops in difficult terrain as well. They're a very solid troop type, and obviously they can kind of run away and work with the archers. Dave, what's your thoughts on this one?
I'm trying to look. I'm looking at my Mayan list and thinking, what? I can't see much difference actually.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough,
you obviously like this one, then it's good. Yeah.
I think when you get 4 bowmen together, or even in this case 4 bowmen and a mediocre bowman, 5 bowmen, that's one hell of a lot of shooting. And if you can pin from the sides of the enemy to stop them, I think that looks like a target for people. But if you protect their flanks, get that V going, then it's very hard to get into those bowmen, and those bowmen will then just sit there and start shooting away at you without any consequence, really. And I think that can be a very powerful tactic in this. I think you're going to end up having to attack the command 1 and command 2 in order to get to command 3, if that makes sense. And if you don't attack them, those bowmen are going to be getting into the flank. So I think that's a really good way of doing it.
Yeah, that command 3 it's kind of bait that bites back, isn't it? Really, in some ways, so it's kind of an interesting thing, because you would just go, I don't want to fight the other 2. I'll go for that, and then you sort of get bogged down trying to get into them. It would suddenly be a lot more tricky.
I actually think you're going to end up going, oh damn, I can't get in. You think you're going to sit there and go, oh, the bait is going to sit there, and you're going to go, oh, that's really nice and juicy for my impact swordsman and my elitist swordsman and things like that. And then you go, but I can't avoid the guys on the 2 sides of them, the impact elite guys of that. I'm going to have to fight them to get to the bowman. Then it's the bowmen who are going to be hitting you in the flanks, weirdly enough.
Yeah, there's a theme with all of these armies about having commands which are designed to go forwards or go backwards or stand or absorb or probe or just attack. You've got all those different options with the way these lists put together that give you, again, I keep saying it, a different set of paper, scissors, stone to do in this period to the normal paper, scissors, stone things that we're used to from designing ADLG lists. No, that is really interesting. Okay, well, thank you. And that definitely is all of the lists that we're covering this week.
This means war.
So look, we talked about the armies and we talked about the lists, and I think we've all surprised ourselves with the difference in style that's possible from stuff that we've all not really looked at before. As always with this, we round these off with just a quick run through some of the available figures. So I guess it's difficult because we've not really got them ourselves, and we've not really fielded them before. But looking at just for the Meso-Americans, Essex, of course, have some solid ranges of Aztecs, Incas, and other ones. I guess with Essex, there's part of me with these Meso-Americans, they're almost cartoony armies, and I just sort of wonder whether Essex's sort of proper proportions are mad enough for these ones. I don't know whether you guys have even cast your eyes over the stuff on the Essex's website. The one that has always appealed to me in a lot of ways has been Tin Soldier with their chunky, chubby guys, and they do Aztecs, conquistadors with the huge headdresses. And I always think this is a period in which that Tin Soldier unique style can actually work really, really well.
They're huge, aren't they? They're really big.
Yeah, they're really sort of fat and chubby and kind of cartoony, but that really works very well. Khorasan have been building up ranges in this for quite some time as well. I think they started with Chimicheks, but they've got Aztecs, and they're always look fantastic the way they're painted up on their site, which is an option. Lurkio have done a few ranges down here for some of the more obscure periods, particularly. I think I painted one of those up I won it as a DBA army in a competition as a prize, and painted up and sold it on eBay. And they were, I think, Lurkio has a couple of different designers. I think these are in the short, stubby, cute hobbit end of the thing, which it gives them a particular flavor. And then obviously the gladiator range from Fighting 15s, which I've done some of the lists for, they've got about 40 different figures. There's almost too many different types of the Jaguar and Eagle warriors to use for some of them, but I don't think they do the is it the Chimichek that you do, Dave, with the pikeman?
Dan,
and then,
the only people do something for that.
Okay, and then Naismith, if you can find Naismith and Roundway, they've got some kind of nice Aztecs, and then there's once you get to some of the more obscure ranges, Irregulars have got some more, Minifigs have got a few Aztecs and Incas as well. Everybody tends to do Aztecs and Incas if they do it before you get into the more Chupis and Amazonian Indians and things like that. So there's actually quite a range of different places to buy it. I don't know, Dave, I think you were saying that there's actually somewhere, if you look on the right, obscure bits of Amazon on the Amazon, not Amazon, you can find, is it a Duncan Head book or
Well, I thought it was Duncan Head, but it's actually Ian Heath.
It's Ian Heath, okay.
Who can tell them apart? I'm sure that'll insult them.
They've never been seen in the same room together, have they?
No. I mean, we all completely depend on the WRG books for all our knowledge, and I don't think the hobby would exist without those books. So Duncan Head and Ian Heath, we praise you, love you, and are completely dependent upon you for so much. But there's Ian Heath wrote some books for one of the 25mm, not Warlord, I think. He did some really strange books. He did one on 19th century steppe armies. But he did one on the conquistadors, and it's very, very hard to find the actual book. But there's a Kindle, a version of it, and it's very much like the old WRG books with the line drawings and the detailed description, and it's fantastic. Go get it. It's got all the nice line drawings and it's got all the shield designs, like we all love that sort of thing. So that's a really good one to get your blood going for that sort of thing.
Okay.
With the manufacturers, I find the Essex ones a little bit too animated. They're sort of like bowing forward and spreading their arms out a bit too much. They're perfectly great figures, but I think of the lot of those there, I would go with the gladiator ones for the moment. I've not looked at Eureka. Although they're the Hawaiians and things, they're really strange. I think the other people are making Lurkio are making the odds and sods, the strange ones, like the things which aren't around. I don't think anybody would mind you mixing, apart from the most brutally difficult person, mixing it all up.
Yeah, no, I think there's probably quite a lot of opportunity to mix, the bowmen and the skirmishers and all the rest of it together, and a guy with an atlatl is a guy with an atlatl at some point. But there's a real good opportunity to paint them up with some pretty bright paints. And there's an awful lot of stuff on the internet where people have painted these and posted them online. So there's plenty of ideas there. And it's one of those armies where, if you are picking it up, okay, you're not necessarily going to use it forever, but if you can pick it up for a decent price, and I think hopefully with this, if we can pique a bit of interest, there's potential even for enough people to end up with these armies that there could be a competition in this theme if people do start getting on board with it. And I think what we've achieved with this podcast is to find that there are different ways of playing it. It's not just one or two armies and just slam into each other and roll some dice. There's a lot of different styles that you can play to give you an intellectually challenging game, as well as just kind of well, hey, look at these, they're all pretty pretty, let's put them on table, put them into contact, roll some dice and take them off table again and drop them back in the box out of it. There's some real interest in playing these armies, and whether any of them quite make it into an open period, I don't know. Possibly we found a few more who could do that in this way as well. I don't know, maybe that's the point to round it off on. Having looked at this multitude of lists and poured through this, Richard, Dave, do you feel a bit more confident that these armies could be viable in those first two periods in a classical or a biblical era competition? More
so the biblicals, I think, because there's less mounted around. I think mounted caused them a major problem, and you'd had to be very defensive. I think it'd be just great fun to paint all those eagle warriors and jaguar warriors if you could get the right figures and get cracking into it.
I think you could make them work in an open period, but I think there are certain troop types, as there are for many armies, but because they don't have that much variety. If you came up against a late medieval army with lots of heavy armor, yes, because if the problem is, although you've got an answer to many things, it's hard to put it in a single list and then have something that is still strong. So I think you'd have to. I think it wouldn't be a complete disaster. I think you could win games in an open competition, but you'd have to love the army. Rather than be, hoping to have an edge. Fine. And that's a perfectly good thing to choose an army based on. Yeah.
But really then we're saying, hopefully be inspired by some of these lists, go pour over them yourselves. And if enough people go out and buy one, we can run a totally different, the brand new paper, scissors, stone. It's probably obsidian, wood and water and blood competition to do which beats which, and if we can get enough of us with these armies, we can all put them on table and have a very, very different weekend,
and have a very confused weekend,
very confused and very colorful weekend. Okay, well, look, on that basis, we'll say goodbye and thank you for listening, and we will be back with another one of these army list specific podcasts soon. I guess hopefully soon we'll be able to start talking about version 4 lists as well, as that appears to be getting more and more imminent. So possibly some excitement for you there as well. So thank you for listening, and goodbye, everybody. Thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed that one. just to remind you, some of the lists, the ones which I pulled together, so not necessarily the best ones I'm afraid, but some of the lists are available to buy as ready-made armies containing all the figures from Fighting 15s. That's fighting15s15s.com. Just go onto their website and search for the ADLG Mega Packs, or look at their Aztecs and Enemies ranges, and you'll be able to see and buy with one click some of the lists here in this unique new tie-up. Hope that's of use to you. See you for the next one.